want to stay within the market where you live, but you're stacking multiple franchise brands on top of each other. And when you do that, you can either prioritize diversification or you can prioritize synergy. Nothing is ever passive, because even if I don't spend a ton of time on the day-to-day in that business, but still there are things that happen periodically that I have to jump in.
Welcome to Franchise Firsthand, the podcast where we go into the real world of franchising and small business ownership.
If you've ever wondered what it's actually like to run a franchise, you are in the right place.
I'm your host, Garth Fasano.
And Connor Groce. We sit down with franchise owners and operators across industries to get unfiltered, boots-on-the-ground perspective as to what's working, what's hard, and what nobody tells you.
Whether you're exploring your first franchise or you're a multi-unit operator looking for new ideas,
Franchise Firsthand gives you the playbook one story at a time. Welcome to Franchise Firsthand. Hey everybody, it's Connor Groce here. Welcome to the Franchise Firsthand podcast. Had a great episode today because we combined my two favorite topics, which are franchising and Connor. So if you like those two topics, you're really going to enjoy this one. We walked through my entire story of getting started in franchising, some of the mistakes that I've made along the way that have made me a stronger business owner because of it. So hopefully this is both an exciting, motivating tale and a cautionary tale for anybody that's interested in getting started in franchise ownership. Stick around to the end. You won't want to miss what we have to discuss, and I look forward to the episode.
Welcome back to Franchising Firsthand, where we interview franchise entrepreneurs to learn all about their business, their priorities, and talk about what it really takes to run and operate a small business. Today, we have Connor Groce on, operator and owner of multiple franchises, and we're going to start digging into a little bit of his history and how he got into this. Great to have you again, Connor, now also as a co-host, and let's dive right in. Why don't you start off by just telling me a little bit about how you got into these and what franchises you're involved with today?
Well, first of all, I'm really stoked that we're doing this. I think that we're going to have some really exciting conversations with people and hear on a firsthand basis what people are doing and how franchising is changing their lives. And that's something that I'm really excited to do. But to the most important topic of the hour, me, I got started in franchising in 2018. I was working for an ownership group in a boutique fitness franchise called Club Pilates. And I, at the time, was in college. I was thinking about going to law school, majoring in political science. That had always been my thing. And so it was just working for them as a side hustle, if you will. And those owners wanted to diversify their portfolio into home services because a lot of franchising people want to, get in and want to expand into other things. And franchising is a great platform to do that. And they were also wise, though, and knew that home services is an operationally intensive business that they didn't have the time or the energy really to run. And so that opened the door for me to join that group as an operating partner in a franchise, and I invested about $5,000 of my own money, which is really all I had at the time. So big commitment, but I did it. Started that franchise in December of 2019. Ran it as an owner-operator for about 18 months. And again, this is home services. So we're talking window cleaning, pressure washing, gutter cleaning, holiday lighting. Crazy 18-month stretch, but got started, built some scale early, hired a manager and still own it today. But then in 2022, ran a search, bought into a franchise called Smash My Trash. Initially had a deal under LOI in Cincinnati. That fell through during diligence after I had moved. So I learned an important lesson there. But immediately had another deal in the same franchise system, got up to South Bend, Indiana in September of 22. Have done 2 subsequent acquisitions in Smash My Trash since then. And then, most recently became a franchise consultant in early 2024. From North Carolina, lived in Indiana for that stretch, like I mentioned, but back in North Carolina now. And I really enjoy being a franchise consultant because that's basically what I do. I started to have people reach out and ask, hey, what do you, I want to do what you're doing. How can I go about that? And so I help people to source opportunities, evaluate them, and fund them.
Let's get into that too. But before, what pulled you in? Here you are, you put $5,000 in, you get into franchising and home services, which, those types of businesses can often be a real grind. And so what pulled you in and what made this, really click as, this is how I'm going to take the rest of my career in franchising?
Well, so the reason that I got into franchising and the reason I stay in franchising are kind of two separate things. I got into the franchise game for the reason that I think a lot of people do, which is to say, hey, I know I want to own my own business and control my own destiny, but don't have great ideas or don't trust myself to go execute on those ideas. And so I want to, join something that already works, already has product market fit, if you will, and already has support and training and branding and all of those things, and just get a little bit of a head start in that way. And all of that is true. But what keeps me in franchising today are the different things that you can do strategically with it from an M&A standpoint. And it's the same with a lot of people that I work with as a consultant, right? The ability to get into a franchise system and grow through acquisition on an accelerated basis, easier to source deals, easier to underwrite deals, easier to integrate deals post-close. All of that is a factor. And all things considered, I think it's easier to raise capital because the franchise community is very supportive of each other. And you have a lot of people that they may have had exits in franchises and they want to deploy their capital in the lane that they already know. So that's really what keeps me in franchising today.
Let me go back to the first part. You said, hey, like you get this proven, you get product market fit and you get to start from the beginning. But a lot of people are doing ETA now where, their thesis is, hey, I can buy a company, not necessarily a franchise, and already start with product market fit. So for folks that are, our ETA listeners out there that are thinking about franchising, how do you see that being different than buying an independent organization?
Well, I mean, they're very similar in that both things, I think, are buying you a head start. They're buying you a head start in different respects and with different risk profiles that come with that. And I would just say, like, I'm very pro ETA, as I'm very pro starting a business. I think that's one thing that I don't really understand in this, like, SMB ecosystem is there tends to be a lot of, like, feuding over what the right path to business ownership is. And I don't see it that way at all. I think that the right path is based on the individual and their circumstances. And we should all support. I want to see people become business owners, irrespective of what the right path is for them to do that. But yeah, I mean, the advantage with buying an existing business is you're getting cash flow, you're getting a customer base. In the right one, you're getting branding and things like that. And, you're getting some of that in a franchise too, often for less capital, and a lot of times it's going to be with a stronger brand name behind it and probably stronger support systems just because they have a wider geographic presence. But there are trade-offs there, and it just depends on what's right for the person.
Totally. I think you're completely right. Like there are a lot of different forms of entrepreneurship, and it really depends on what's right for the person, whether it's franchising, which I do think is fantastic. I was just asking this question to sort of tease out those differences. So the second part of that, you mentioned that, one of the things that's kept you in franchising and what you find so interesting is some of the strategy behind it, where there are more opportunities for M&A, more access to capital. I think that's something that's incredibly appealing about franchising. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I always say that the directions that you can take franchising strategically, there's the vertical approach and the horizontal approach. And none of this is exclusive to franchising, by the way. These are all things that can be emulated even if you're in a non-franchise business. I just think that the franchise model presents certain advantages for each of those. And so, when we talk about horizontal expansion in franchising, a lot of that times that means that you're in one franchise brand and you're growing in multiple markets. And so that can be anything from greenfield, new territory growth, new developments to acquisitions, to a combination of both. A lot of times people have this hybrid approach where they'll acquire, a certain number of units and then also open new territories on top of those units. All of those play into what I would consider to be a horizontal strategy. And then a vertical strategy is where you're more concentrated on the geography. So you may want to stay within the market where you live, but you're stacking multiple franchise brands on top of each other. And when you do that, you can either prioritize diversification or you can prioritize synergy.
Let me just jump in because you've expanded. I mean, you started with one unit in one brand, and now you have, an additional brand. So, like, what made you pursue that path, and what did you see as the pros and cons, or was it maybe just opportunistic in timing? How would you think about that now?
That one was more opportunistic in timing. Part of my story is that I picked the wrong franchise the first time around, which is not a good way to begin franchising. I would highly advise against that.
Episode just on that.
Right. Yeah.
Really
And again, they're great people, and so it's not a knock on them. I just, in retrospect, would have done that differently. And so part of the reason that I got into a different franchise in a different market was simply because I didn't want to double and triple down on my first one, even though I wanted to grow. And so had I picked one that I was more bullish on, I would have continued to go more of the straight and narrow path down either, doubling down in that brand or doubling down on, things that are more industry adjacent within the same market that would be more synergetic together.
If you're new getting into franchising, how do you even think about this? Like, is the strategy to get into one brand, buy more in that brand, buy an adjacent brand? It seems like they're just like, this is what you were saying and why this is so interesting. That there are so many different ways to do it. So maybe just walk me through a little bit of a high level of how you'd coach somebody through that.
Yeah, so I think two things. I think, first of all, it's important to have an understanding of where you're going and have ideas for what the potential of all of this can become, because that's part of what keeps you motivated through the grind and the minutia on the front end. But I also think it's important to build in optionality. Optionality is so important in business in general, but I think particularly in franchising, because inherently in a franchise system, there are a lot of things that are just beyond your control. And so the framework that I use is the triple option, which is similar to in football. The quarterback keeps the ball, and they can either, instead of scripting out exactly what they're going to do, they keep the ball in their hands, wait to see how the defense lines up, wait to see who's available, and they can either keep the ball themselves and run with it. They can pitch it to the running back, or they can hand it off to the fullback, but they wait to see how things play out. I think about franchising the same way, and the triple option in franchising is exit, it's executive ownership, and it's empire. And so, in my case with my first franchise, executive ownership was what made the most sense. I didn't want to build an empire in that brand, but the saving grace was that I was able to go the executive ownership path, which that is just the term that I use for owning the business without working in it, if you will. A more accurate, accurate version of the word passive, if you will.
You said you did the grind for 18 months and you put in your time, and you probably continue to put in some time. I'm always a little bit leery of people say, "Oh, it's passive. I don't have to do."
Oh, it's anything. Not passive. No, no, nothing is ever passive, because even if I don't spend a ton of time on the day-to-day in that business, but still there are things that happen periodically that I have to jump in. And so, no small business is passive.
Thank you for insert that as a little bit of a disclaimer for folks thinking, oh Empire.
Please.
So, but even within empire building, it sounds like there's multiple pathways, like expanding geographically within one brand, acquiring others, doing de novos, and then maybe expanding into another brand in that portfolio, or so you keep the same geo, maybe you're consolidating support resources and getting like more leverage out of what would be your SG&A expenses, or maybe you're trying to get into a new geo to sort of mitigate risks in a particular market or something like that.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I think we talked about the horizontal path, and then the vertical path. Like I mentioned, that's when you're stacking multiple franchises on top of each other. An example would be when I got started. I was working with we're working with folks that were invested in fitness franchises, and they wanted to get into home services. There's no synergy between home services and fitness. That was a diversification play. And it made sense because this was in 2019, they were in the fitness business. 2020 was not a good year for the fitness business. So pretty good intuition on their part there. But then the other path there, which again is something that had I been more bullish on my first brand, what I would have considered would be staying in the same market and acquiring synergenic brands, on top of each other in the same market. And in that respect, you're looking for synergy mainly with personnel, with real estate, and with customers. Those are really the three areas that we see overlap in synergenic, vertically integrated franchise portfolios.
What are some, I just want to help make this come alive. I can think of a couple. I know one of our clients that does this, and actually I've seen some of the challenges with it too. So I want to hear from you to make this come alive. Like, what would be a synergistic brand to add on top of in sort of the same geo where you get those benefits?
Yeah, it's such a great question, because a lot of people think that just the more industry adjacent it is, the more synergenic it is. And that's not the case at all, because the reality is that a roofing business and a house cleaning business, while they could both be classified as home services, they're completely different businesses. It's like high ticket versus low ticket, subcontracted versus, W-2, the sales cycle is completely different. So it's important to look intrinsically into the mechanics of both the sales side of things and the operations side of things. And so examples where I see this work the best is where there's alignment in either, multiple businesses that are all high ticket subcontractor driven businesses. A lot of times these are going to be either installation or renovation businesses. The reason is because like selling a roof versus a fence versus a niche one day bathroom renovation, anything like that, again, it's all high ticket. The sales cycle is going to look somewhat the same. The lead gen is going to look different, but in a good franchisor, they should help you with that. So that's an opportunity where you can have people cross trained to sell multiple services, and it's easier to do that if they're all high ticket than it is if it's a lower touch or higher touch, relatively speaking, sales cycle. And then the other thing is on the labor front. A project manager that's overseeing roofing and fencing, just as an examples here, that's going to correlate more than a project manager overseeing a renovation business and a general manager overseeing a cleaning business. The role, the cadence is just very different. So those are some of the through lines that I look for when people are looking for synergy.
Yeah. So we've dug in a lot into how you started to expand in franchising. In your intro, you also talked about how now you're a broker. So how did, franchise ownership, operations, now executive ownership transition into franchise, consulting?
Yeah, well, I was, I knew that I wanted to do something to just utilize the knowledge and experience that I had gained and all the ways that I've stubbed my toe in ways that still hurt, frankly, and hopefully help other people avoid some of the same mistakes. And so, but yeah, really just started. I had a lot of people that were reaching out to me, that said, "Hey, I'm interested in doing what you're doing. Can you help me?" And so you started taking those calls very early on, and then eventually, it wasn't until probably about year and a half later that I was like, okay, this is something that I really be interested in doing. But I have to say, I love it. I'm a complete geek about franchises. I love having exposure to different business models and thinking things through and, working with people during what's, a sensitive and, meaningful time of life and a meaningful transition period. And, sometimes I go on podcasts and webinars and stuff, and people introduce me as a franchising expert. I do not consider myself an expert in any respect. I didn't go to school for this. I'm not a guru. All I can offer people is to say, I will walk alongside of you, as I would if I were in your shoes as somebody who's done this a couple times before. And we go through it in a very collaborative way. So I really enjoy it.
I imagine you have a couple good battle scars that, probably people new to franchising can learn from. Are there any good stories there?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we could, another podcast in and of itself, but, yeah, I would say, so first of all, the home service franchise started December 2019. So that got thrown into COVID within the first 3-4 months in business, which that was obviously, ended up being good for the home service industry. But there was a moment there, we didn't clean people's interior windows for a couple months because people were so scared, So there was that uncertainty that, was definitely challenging to deal with. One of the highest impact things that happened to me that first year in business was, this business does Christmas lights, which is a very busy time of year. The record in this franchise was about $100,000 of revenue in just holiday lighting that they had done. And we were sitting mid-October, and I had already pre-sold 70,000. So I knew I was going to break the record. Was booked 4 weeks out, had as good of a crew as I'd ever had 2 crew leaders, 2 technicians, and both crew leaders quit on the same day in very dramatic fashion. And again, you're talking about booked 4 weeks out. I'm like, there is no way that we're going to be able to handle that. And there was literally a moment, I can still feel it right now in our shop. We had artificial turf on the ground. And I genuinely remember laying down on the turf and can still feel the turf in my hands because I had no idea what to do. Completely freaking out.
And I need to do an entire episode just on that and how you got through that. Because I think everyone in small business, whether it's franchising, ETA, or existing operators, have these moments, and everyone has how you deal with them. So that's a great example.
I always say handled it middle school girls basketball tryout style, where I had blasted ads all over Indeed, said everybody show up, to work the next day, and would send 2 home until I had our crew. And it was chaotic, but somehow made it. And smashed the shit out of that record, by the way, in case you're curious.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Those are some of the fun moments in this too, where, you're going to get thrown curveballs no matter what you do, but it's how you handle them, how you get through them. And I think as a franchise leader, as a franchise owner, even just as a GM, getting to see these moments of success is also so real too. So that's probably a lot of the fun. And I imagine it was fun for the team too, that you built during that moment.
Well, with personnel issues like that, I think that part of what it does to you is you really start to appreciate your team when you have them. Because, and again, it's not like I'm on the other side of the mountain looking, or on the top of the mountain looking down. Like we deal with this kind of thing all the time. But it is reassuring to know that having been through that moment where I felt completely alone and didn't have a team, I'm like, anything that we deal with could be a lot worse because I have a team to deal with, to handle it with me. And that's, so it's good perspective to gain, if nothing else.
Yep. No, that makes sense. So, if you were maybe looking back on these experiences, like anything you would do differently that might help listeners thinking about franchising or, plotting their next steps in franchising?
There's a ton that I would do differently. Everything from, the first brand I would have picked differently. I took my foot off the gas with that brand too quickly, put it on cruise control too quickly when it's still subscale, which has caused challenges. Like I said, had a deal, moved before I had a deal close and smashed my trash, and then it fell through. That was a big mistake that I learned from. Paid too much for the next one, in a very, industry concentrated, customer concentrated situation that I fully didn't wrap my head around, but that was really challenging to deal with. I was not as engaged in the operations early on with that franchise because it was existing. I kind of didn't do my time in the trenches to the degree that I should have, and that's had negative downstream impacts on the duration of my ownership. Had another acquisition that didn't work out as planned, and it's fine, but it's definitely been a distraction. I have screwed up a ton of stuff, so it's all of those things, again, are stories in and of themselves. But the point is I feel very fortunate that I at least got started in franchising, and franchising gave me the playing field to be able to make some of those mistakes when the stakes are lower, and to have a network around me and support systems around me to learn from those mistakes and correct them as quickly as possible. And I think that because of the last 6 years, I think that the remaining 60 years of my career are going to be stronger because of it.
I think that's an awesome way to maybe wrap this up about franchising, because some of the things that are so different from my experience going on the sort of independent ETA route is that, you just mentioned you have this network surrounding you for support. You have these systems and processes. And while there are a lot of lonely moments in small business ownership, in franchising, you have a very close peer group to help you work through those. So I think that's a awesome way to sort of summarize some of those big differences on those major different choices that we talked about a little bit up front. Anything else you want to add before we wrap it up, Connor?
Well, just echoing that last point, I think that the network that you get in a franchise system, me being in franchise systems, I think has flattened my learning curve in business in general by 10 or 20 years at least, because of sheer osmosis. It's like I'm just in proximity to really smart, driven people all the time. And I've been very blessed with great people around me and absorb everything like a sponge. And again, you can't buy into a system just for the network. Like, the business model has to make sense, but that's just an added benefit that I think sometimes people don't fully underwrite and think about how valuable that can be. So can certainly attest to that.
Perfect. Well, I think this is a great overview of how you got into this. And so we'll just leave it there. Thanks, Connor.
Perfect. Thanks, Garth.